The drawing-room of Rosewood Hall was aglow with candlelight, each flame dancing in the gentle evening breeze. Outside, autumn had begun to paint the countryside in hues of amber and gold. But inside, the atmosphere was frigid, despite the crackling fire in the hearth. Agnes Bennet sat quietly in the corner, her slender fingers working methodically at her embroidery. At 20 years of age, she had mastered the art of making herself unnoticed, a necessary skill in her own home. Her chestnut hair was pulled back in a simple style that emphasized her delicate features and hazel eyes, which remained downcast, focused on her needlework. "Mary! Camilla!" Lady Fiona Bennet's voice rang through the room, causing Agnes to wince slightly. "Come here at once. I must see how the new gowns look before the dressmaker leaves." Two young women, both adorned in half-finished silk dresses, hurried to their mother's side. "Turn around, Mary. The blue brings out your eyes magnificently," Lady Fiona declared, adjusting her daughter's sleeve. "And Camilla, the pink is perfect with your complexion. You shall both outshine every young lady at Lord Westfield's ball." Agnes glanced up briefly, then returned to her work. There had been no new gown ordered for her. There never was. "Agnes!" She looked up, surprised to hear her name. Her father, the Earl of Harlington, had entered the room. Earl William Bennet was a tall, distinguished man, whose kind eyes were the same shade of hazel as his daughter's. Lines of worry had begun to etch themselves around them in recent years. "Father," Agnes said softly, rising to curtsy. "I trust your day has been pleasant?" he asked, his voice warm. Before Agnes could respond, Lady Fiona interjected. "William, you simply must see how lovely Mary and Camilla look in their new gowns. The season shall be upon us before we know it, and with the Duke of Ashmont arriving in the county, we must ensure they make a favourable impression." The Earl's attention was diverted, and Agnes faded once more into the background. It had been this way for 5 years, ever since her father had married Lady Fiona following her mother's death. The widowed Lady Fiona had brought her 2 daughters, Mary and Camilla, into the household, and slowly but surely Agnes had been pushed aside. Not that her father didn't love her, Agnes knew he did, but Earl William was a man who valued peace, and Lady Fiona's displeasure was a storm few could weather. "The Duke of Ashmont," Lady Fiona continued, her voice taking on a reverent quality. 31 years of age, unmarried, and the wealthiest peer in England. He arrives tomorrow to take up residence at Thornhill Court for the autumn. "I heard he rarely attends social gatherings," Camilla said, adjusting her skirts. "They say he's quite severe." "Nonsense," Lady Fiona dismissed. "He is simply discerning, and we shall give him every reason to look favourably upon this family." Agnes listened quietly. She had heard much about Elliot Leeds, the Duke of Ashmont. His reputation preceded him, cold, calculating, brilliant in business, and formidable in the House of Lords. Some called him the Winter Duke for his frosty demeanour. Agnes found herself curious about this man, who seemed to command such attention despite his apparent disinterest in society. "Agnes, you've been at that same stitch for 5 minutes," Lady Fiona suddenly snapped. "Do try to be useful." "Yes, Lady Fiona," Agnes murmured, returning to her work. Later that evening, Agnes escaped to the sanctuary of the library. Here, among the leather-bound volumes that lined the walls, she found solace. Her mother had loved books, and Agnes had inherited that passion. She ran her fingers along the spines, finally selecting a volume of poetry. The door opened, and her father entered. "I thought I might find you here," he said with a gentle smile. "Am I that predictable?" Agnes asked, returning his smile. "Pleasantly so." He joined her by the window seat. "I've something to tell you. We shall be hosting a dinner for the Duke of Ashmont this Friday." Agnes nodded. "So I gathered from Lady Fiona's excitement." The Earl sighed. "Agnes, I know things have been difficult since I married Fiona." "You don't need to explain, Father. You deserve happiness." "As do you, my dear, which is why I've insisted that you attend the dinner." Agnes looked up in surprise. Lady Fiona agreed to this. "I am still master of this house," he said, though his tone lacked conviction. "You are my daughter, and you shall be present." Agnes felt a flicker of warmth in her chest. These small rebellions were all her father could manage against the formidable will of his wife. "Thank you, Father." The Earl patted her hand and stood. "The Duke may be as cold as they say, but he is a fair man. His father and I were acquainted in our youth." He paused at the door. "Good night, Agnes." "Good night, Father." After he left, Agnes returned to her book, but found herself unable to concentrate. The dinner would be the first social event she had attended in months. Lady Fiona had developed a convenient habit of forgetting to include Agnes's name on invitations, or claiming that Agnes was indisposed when opportunities for social gatherings arose. The neglect was subtle enough that the Earl often didn't notice, and when he did, Lady Fiona always had a plausible explanation. Agnes had stopped fighting it long ago, finding it easier to retreat into her books and solitary walks. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. Lady Fiona was determined that every detail of the dinner be perfect. The silver was polished to a mirror shine, the finest linens were pressed, and the menu was planned with meticulous care. Mary and Camilla were fitted for yet another set of new gowns, while Agnes quietly altered one of her old dresses, adding new lace at the collar and cuffs to freshen its appearance. On the morning of the dinner, Agnes escaped to the gardens for a moment of peace. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of approaching rain. She walked along the gravel paths, breathing deeply. "Agnes, where have you been?" Lady Fiona's voice shattered her tranquility. "Mary requires your assistance with her hair. And for heaven's sake, do something about your own appearance before this evening. The Duke of Ashmont is not accustomed to shabby company." "Yes, Lady Fiona," Agnes replied automatically. Hours later, Agnes stood before her mirror, surveying her reflection. Her gown of deep green silk was several seasons old, but well maintained. She had arranged her hair in a simple but elegant style, with a few tendrils framing her face. It was not the height of fashion like her stepsister's elaborate coiffures, but it suited her. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Enter," she called. Her father's valet, Harrison, stepped into the room. "Miss Agnes, the Earl asked me to bring you this." He extended a small velvet box. Inside lay a pair of pearl earrings that had belonged to her mother. "His lordship thought you might wish to wear these tonight," Harrison said with a kind smile. Agnes touched the pearls gently. "Thank you, Harrison. Please tell my father I am most grateful." After the valet departed, Agnes fastened the earrings and took a deep breath. Tonight she would not be invisible. Tonight she would honor her mother's memory and her father's wishes by holding her head high. The sound of carriage wheels on gravel announced the arrival of their distinguished guest. Agnes descended the stairs to find her family assembled in the entrance hall. Lady Fiona was resplendent in burgundy silk, while Mary and Camilla sparkled in their new gowns of azure and rose. The Earl stood tall and dignified in his formal attire. Lady Fiona's eyes narrowed at the sight of Agnes. "I thought that gown had been disposed of," she said under her breath. Before Agnes could respond, the doors opened and the butler announced in solemn tones, "His Grace the Duke of Ashmont." Elliot Leeds, Duke of Ashmont, strode into the hall with the confident air of a man accustomed to command. He was taller than Agnes had expected, with broad shoulders and a lean, athletic build beneath his impeccable evening clothes. His features were sharp and striking, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes of such a piercing blue that they seemed to cut through all pretense. His dark hair was styled in the current fashion, though with less elaboration than many gentlemen favoured. Everything about him spoke of restrained power and meticulous control. "Your Grace," the Earl stepped forward to greet him. "Welcome to Rosewood Hall." The Duke bowed slightly. "Lord Harlington, it has been some time." "Indeed. May I present my wife, Lady Fiona Bennet, Countess of Harlington." Lady Fiona sank into a deep curtsy. "Your Grace, it is an honour to have you in our home." "The pleasure is mine, Lady Harlington," the Duke replied with perfect courtesy, though his expression remained impassive. "My stepdaughters, Miss Mary and Miss Camilla Whitmore." The young women curtsied gracefully, their faces arranged in practised smiles. The Duke acknowledged them with a polite nod. "And my daughter, Miss Agnes Bennet." Agnes stepped forward and curtsied. As she rose, she found those intense blue eyes fixed upon her with an unexpected focus. For a moment, something flickered across the Duke's face. Surprise, perhaps, or curiosity. "Miss Bennet," he said, his deep voice sending an inexplicable shiver down her spine. "Your Grace," she replied softly. The moment stretched a fraction too long before Lady Fiona smoothly intervened. "Shall we proceed to the drawing-room for refreshments before dinner?" she suggested, taking the Duke's arm with practised charm. "I understand you've just returned from London, Your Grace. You must tell us all about the latest news from the capital." As they moved toward the drawing-room, Agnes trailed behind. but she could feel the weight of the Duke's gaze as he glanced back, those piercing blue eyes seeing her in a way no one had in years. And for the first time in a very long time, Agnes Bennet felt truly visible. The dinner party proceeded with the polished formality typical of aristocratic gatherings. Lady Fiona had strategically placed her daughters on either side of the Duke at the table, while Agnes was seated at the far end, nearly hidden by the elaborate centerpiece of autumn blooms and candlesticks. From her position, Agnes could observe the scene with the detachment she had perfected over the years. Mary and Camilla took turns engaging the Duke in conversation, their carefully rehearsed topics flowing seamlessly. Lady Fiona beamed with approval, occasionally directing the discussion toward her daughter's accomplishments. "Camilla has the most exquisite touch on the pianoforte, Your Grace," Lady Fiona remarked as the first course was served. "She studied with a master from Vienna." "Indeed," the Duke responded, his tone revealing nothing of his interest or lack thereof. "And Mary's watercolors have been much admired," she continued. "Perhaps you might wish to see them after dinner." The Duke nodded politely. "That would be agreeable." Agnes ate quietly, expecting to pass the evening unnoticed as usual. She was startled when the Duke's voice suddenly addressed her directly. "Miss Bennet, your father tells me you are quite the scholar. Do you have a particular area of interest?" All eyes turned to Agnes. Lady Fiona's narrowed in displeasure. "I enjoy history and literature, Your Grace," Agnes replied, finding her voice, "particularly the works of Shakespeare and the Greek classics." "You read Greek?" the Duke asked, one eyebrow raised in what appeared to be genuine interest. "Yes, Your Grace. My mother ensured I was educated in languages from an early age." Agnes had an unconventional upbringing, Lady Fiona interjected with a tight smile. "Before I joined the family, of course. Mary, tell His Grace about the delightful ball we attended in London last season." Mary immediately launched into a detailed account of the evening, but Agnes noticed that the Duke's eyes remained on her for a moment longer, thoughtful and assessing. The pattern continued throughout dinner. Whenever the conversation naturally turned toward Agnes, Lady Fiona swiftly redirected it. Yet the Duke seemed determined to hear from the quiet young woman at the end of the table, addressing questions specifically to her about her opinions on books, music, and current affairs. Agnes answered carefully, aware of Lady Fiona's increasing tension, but unwilling to squander this rare opportunity to engage in meaningful conversation. The Duke, she discovered, was remarkably well-read and possessed a sharp, analytical mind. His reputation for coldness seemed exaggerated. He was reserved, certainly, but his questions were thoughtful and his responses considered. After dinner, the gentlemen remained for port, while the ladies withdrew to the drawing-room. Lady Fiona immediately rounded on Agnes. "What do you think you're doing?" she hissed, keeping her voice low enough that the servants wouldn't overhear. "I beg your pardon?" Agnes asked, genuinely confused. "Attempting to monopolize His Grace's attention. It's most unbecoming. I was merely answering his questions, Lady Fiona." "With unnecessary elaboration," Lady Fiona snapped. "Remember your place, Agnes. The Duke of Ashmont is here to become acquainted with suitable young ladies, meaning Mary and Camilla. Your scholarly pretensions will only make you appear blue-stocking and unattractive." Agnes felt heat rise to her cheeks, but maintained her composure. "As you say, Lady Fiona." When the gentlemen joined them, Lady Fiona orchestrated the evening with precision. Camilla was instructed to play the pianoforte, while Mary displayed her portfolio of watercolors. Agnes was relegated to turning pages for Camilla, effectively placing her in a subservient position. Yet throughout the performance she felt the Duke's gaze return to her repeatedly. When their eyes met briefly, she thought she detected something like sympathy in his expression. As the evening drew to a close, the Duke prepared to take his leave. "Lord Harlington, Lady Harlington," he addressed his hosts, "thank you for a most pleasant evening." "The pleasure was entirely ours, Your Grace," Lady Fiona gushed. "We do hope you will honor us with your company again soon." "Indeed," the Duke replied. "In fact, I am hosting a small gathering at Thornhill Court next week. I would be delighted if you would all attend." His gaze swept across the family, lingering momentarily on Agnes. "All of you," he emphasized. Lady Fiona's smile faltered slightly before she recovered. "How gracious, Your Grace. We should be honored." After the Duke's departure, Lady Fiona could barely contain her excitement. "Did you hear that? "He is hosting a gathering and specifically invited us," she exclaimed to her daughters. "This is precisely what we hoped for." Agnes slipped away quietly, retreating to the library. She sat in the window seat, gazing out at the moonlit gardens, her mind filled with thoughts of the enigmatic Duke. There had been something in his manner, a directness, an attentiveness, that made her feel seen for the first time in years. She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear her father enter until he spoke. "You made quite an impression on the Duke," he said, startling her. "Did I?" Agnes turned to him. "I hardly spoke." The Earl smiled. "Sometimes it is not the volume of words but their quality that matters. Elliot Leeds is not a man easily impressed, yet he asked me several questions about you after dinner." Agnes felt a flutter in her chest. "What sort of questions?" "About your education, your interests. He seemed particularly intrigued by your knowledge of Greek." The Earl sat beside her. "He also inquired about your mother." "My mother?" Agnes whispered. "Yes." He remembered hearing of her intellect and character. He patted her hand. "The Duke mentioned specifically that he looks forward to seeing you at his gathering." Agnes didn't know how to respond. The idea that someone of the Duke's standing had noticed her, had found her worthy of attention, was both thrilling and unsettling. "Lady Fiona will not be pleased," she finally said. The Earl's expression hardened slightly. "You are my daughter, Agnes. It is time I remembered that more clearly." He stood to leave. "Rest well, my dear." The days leading up to the Duke's gathering were fraught with tension. Lady Fiona oscillated between gloating over the invitation and fretting over every detail of her daughter's appearances. New gowns were hastily commissioned, hairstyles were practiced, and mannerisms were rehearsed. Agnes observed the preparations with detached amusement, expecting that despite the Duke's specific inclusion, Lady Fiona would find a way to prevent her attendance. Her suspicions were confirmed the day before the gathering. "Agnes, I'm afraid you'll need to remain at home tomorrow evening," Lady Fiona announced at breakfast. "Mrs. Collins has taken ill, and someone must review the household accounts." "But the Duke specifically invited Agnes," the Earl objected, looking up from his newspaper. Lady Fiona's smile was strained. "The household cannot run itself, William, and Agnes is so capable with figures. Surely the Duke will understand." "The accounts can wait," the Earl said firmly. "Agnes will attend the gathering as invited." Lady Fiona's eyes flashed, but she said nothing more in the Earl's presence. However, once he left the room, she turned to Agnes. "You may attend," she said coldly, "but you will remember your place. Do not embarrass this family with your presumption." The following evening, the Bennet family arrived at Thornhill Court, the Duke of Ashmont's ancestral estate. The imposing manor house was lit by hundreds of candles, their glow spilling out onto the manicured lawns and illuminating the facade of pale stone. Agnes stepped from the carriage, her heart beating rapidly. She wore her best gown, a silk creation in deep sapphire that she had carefully altered to reflect the current fashion. Her mother's pearls adorned her ears, and her hair was arranged simply but elegantly. Lady Fiona had spent the journey coaching Mary and Camilla on their behaviour, while pointedly ignoring Agnes. The Earl had noticed and offered his daughter a reassuring smile as they approached the entrance. Inside, the grand hall of Thornhill Court was a vision of elegance. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the assembled guests, who represented the finest families in the county. A small orchestra played from an alcove, providing a gentle backdrop of music. The Duke himself stood near the entrance, greeting his guests with formal courtesy. When the Bennet family was announced, his eyes immediately sought Agnes. "Lord Harlington, Lady Harlington," he greeted them, before turning to the young women. "Miss Whitmore, Miss Camilla, Miss Bennet." His gaze lingered on Agnes, and she could have sworn the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "I am pleased you could all attend." "We are delighted to be here, Your Grace," Lady Fiona replied, subtly manoeuvring Mary closer to the Duke. "What a magnificent gathering." As the evening progressed, Agnes found herself observing the interactions around her. Lady Fiona orchestrated Mary and Camilla's movements with the precision of a general, ensuring they were always in the Duke's line of sight, always available for conversation or a dance. To Agnes's surprise, the Earl had become more assertive, introducing her to several guests and engaging her in conversations he knew would interest her. It was a small rebellion against Lady Fiona's orchestrations, and Agnes appreciated it deeply. She was speaking with an elderly baroness about a recent translation of Homer when she felt a presence beside her. Turning, she found the Duke of Ashmont standing there, his intense blue eyes focused solely on her. "Miss Bennet," he said with a slight bow, "might I have a word with you?" The baroness excused herself with a knowing smile, leaving Agnes alone with the Duke. "Your Grace," she curtsied, suddenly aware of Lady Fiona watching from across the room, her expression thunderous. "I wonder if you might join me for a tour of the library," the Duke said. "I recall your interest in literature, and I believe my collection might be of interest to you." Agnes hesitated, knowing that accepting would further incur Lady Fiona's wrath, yet the opportunity was too tempting to refuse. "I would be honored, Your Grace." He offered his arm, and she placed her hand lightly upon it. As he led her from the main hall, Agnes could feel the weight of curious stares following them. The library of Thornhill Court was the most magnificent Agnes had ever seen. Shelves rose from floor to ceiling, filled with thousands of volumes. The scent of leather and paper filled the air, and comfortable reading chairs were arranged near the fireplace. "This is extraordinary," Agnes breathed, unable to hide her delight. The Duke watched her, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. "My father began the collection, but I have expanded it considerably. It is rare to find someone who appreciates it properly." "How could anyone not?" Agnes moved toward the nearest shelf, her fingers hovering reverently above the spines. "May I?" He nodded, and she carefully selected a volume, opening it with gentle hands. "First edition Dante," she noted with appreciation. "In the original Italian, no less." "You read Italian as well?" the Duke asked. "Yes, though not as fluently as I would like." She returned the book to its place. "Your Grace, forgive my directness, but I must ask, why have you brought me here?" The Duke considered her for a moment. "Directness is a quality I value, Miss Bennet. To answer your question, I find you intriguing." Agnes couldn't help but smile. "Intriguing. That's a carefully chosen word, Your Grace." "I choose all my words with care," he replied, the hint of a smile playing at his lips. "You are unlike any young woman I have encountered in society. You speak your mind, yet with consideration. You are accomplished without being showy, and you appear utterly uninterested in the pursuits that occupy most young ladies of your station." "Such as securing a wealthy husband?" Agnes asked boldly. The Duke actually laughed then, a rich sound that transformed his severe features. "Precisely. It is refreshing." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, surrounded by books and the soft glow of candlelight. "Your stepmother is not pleased with the attention I have shown you," the Duke observed. Agnes sighed. "Lady Fiona has specific ambitions for her daughters, and none for you." "I am an inconvenience to be managed," Agnes admitted, surprised by her own candor. "A reminder of my father's first marriage, and an obstacle to her complete control of the household." The Duke's expression darkened. "That is unconscionable. It is what it is, Your Grace. I have made my peace with it." "Have you?" he asked, stepping closer. "Or have you simply learned to hide your light to avoid casting shadows that might offend?" Agnes looked up at him, startled by his insight. "Perhaps a bit of both." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Lady Fiona stood in the entrance, her expression carefully composed despite the fury evident in her eyes. "Agnes, dear, your father is looking for you," she said smoothly. "And Your Grace, I believe Lady Westfield was hoping for an introduction to you." The Duke's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Thank you, Lady Harlington. Miss Bennet and I were just concluding our discussion of the library collection." Agnes curtsied, preparing to leave. "Thank you for showing me your magnificent library, Your Grace." As she moved toward the door, the Duke spoke again. "Miss Bennet, perhaps you would honor me with a dance when we return to the hall." Agnes turned back, aware of Lady Fiona's stiffening posture. "I would be delighted, Your Grace." For the first time in years, Agnes felt a spark of defiance ignite within her. The Duke had seen her, truly seen her, and in his presence she felt herself beginning to emerge from the shadows that had so long defined her existence. The following weeks brought a remarkable change to Agnes's life. The Duke of Ashmont had begun calling at Rosewood Hall with increasing frequency, and much to Lady Fiona's dismay, his attention remained firmly fixed on Agnes rather than her daughters. Each visit followed a similar pattern. The Duke would arrive, exchange pleasantries with the family, and then specifically request Agnes's company for a walk in the gardens or a discussion in the library. Lady Fiona could hardly refuse these requests without appearing rude, though her displeasure was evident in the tight set of her mouth and the cold glare she directed at her stepdaughter when she thought no one was looking. For Agnes, these encounters were transformative. The Duke, who had gradually invited her to call him Elliot in their private conversations, was unlike anyone she had ever known. Beneath his reserved exterior lay a keen intellect, dry wit, and unexpected kindness. They discussed books, philosophy, politics, and art with an ease that surprised them both. "I never thought to find someone with whom I could speak so freely," Elliot confessed during one of their walks through the autumn gardens. The leaves had turned to brilliant crimson and gold, creating a canopy of colour above them. "Nor I," Agnes replied. "In truth, I had resigned myself to a rather solitary existence." Elliot frowned. "Your isolation was by design, your stepmother's design." Agnes didn't deny it. In the past weeks, she had become more honest about the reality of her situation. "Lady Fiona saw me as competition for her daughters. It was easier to make me invisible than to acknowledge my existence." "And your father allowed this?" There was an edge to his voice. "My father," Agnes sighed. "He loves me, I know he does. But after my mother died, something in him broke. He remarried quickly, too quickly. Lady Fiona provided order when his world was chaos, and he became dependent on that. By the time he realized the true nature of her character, the patterns were set." "Yet he seems to be finding his voice now," Elliot observed. It was true. The Earl had begun to assert himself more, insisting on Agnes's inclusion in family activities and openly acknowledging her accomplishments. It was as though seeing his daughter through the Duke's eyes had reminded him of his duty to protect her. "Your attention has given him courage," Agnes said softly, "for which I am grateful, though I fear it has made my relationship with Lady Fiona even more strained." Elliot stopped walking and turned to face her. "Agnes, there is something I must ask you." Her heart quickened at the seriousness in his tone. "Yes?" Before he could continue, they were interrupted by the sound of approaching footsteps. Mary appeared around the corner of the path, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and determination. "Your Grace, Agnes," she curtsied. "I apologize for the intrusion, but Mother sent me to inform you that tea is being served in the drawing-room." Elliot's jaw tightened momentarily before he composed his features into a polite mask. "Thank you, Miss Whitmore. We shall join you shortly." Mary hesitated, then added, "Mother specifically requested your immediate presence, Your Grace. She has invited the Viscount and Viscountess Halsey, who are most eager to make your acquaintance." It was a transparent ploy, and Agnes could see that Elliot was not deceived. Nevertheless, social convention demanded compliance. "Very well," he said, offering his arm to Agnes. "Shall we, Miss Bennet?" The drawing-room was tense with unspoken hostilities. Lady Fiona had indeed invited the Halseys, whose daughter Sophia was widely regarded as one of the most eligible young ladies in the county. Lady Fiona made a great show of seating the Duke beside Miss Halsey, while Agnes was relegated to pouring tea at the far side of the room. Throughout the gathering, Elliot maintained perfect courtesy toward Miss Halsey, but his eyes frequently sought Agnes. She returned his gaze with a small smile, understanding the game Lady Fiona was playing and refusing to be wounded by it. When the Duke finally took his leave, he made a point of approaching Agnes. "Miss Bennet, I regret that our conversation was interrupted earlier. Perhaps we might continue it tomorrow. I'm hosting a small musical evening at Thornhill Court, and would be honoured if you and your family would attend." "Another gathering so soon, Your Grace," Lady Fiona interjected. "How delightful, though I fear we may have a prior engagement." "We have no engagements tomorrow evening," the Earl contradicted mildly but firmly. "We would be pleased to attend, Your Grace." The Duke nodded, satisfaction evident in his eyes. "Excellent. Until tomorrow, then." After he departed, Lady Fiona turned on Agnes with barely contained fury. "This has gone quite far enough," she hissed. "Whatever game you think you're playing with the Duke of Ashmont, it ends now." "I am playing no game, Lady Fiona," Agnes replied calmly. "Do you honestly believe a man of his standing would have any serious interest in you? You with your books and your plain ways." Lady Fiona laughed cruelly. "He is amusing himself, nothing more. Men of his rank often seek diversion with unconventional young women, before making suitable matches. Agnes felt the sting of her words, but refused to show it. If that is the case, then you have nothing to fear from my friendship with the Duke. Friendship? Lady Fiona scoffed. You naive child. There is no friendship between men and women, only advantage and exploitation. That is quite enough, Fiona, the Earl interrupted, his voice unusually stern. You will not speak to my daughter in this manner. Lady Fiona's eyes widened at her husband's unexpected assertion of authority. William, surely you cannot approve of this inappropriate attachment. There is nothing inappropriate about the Duke's attention to Agnes. He is a man of honour, and if he chooses to pay court to my daughter, I can think of no objection. The words hung in the air between them. Pay court. The Earl had named the unspoken possibility that had been developing over the past weeks. This is absurd, Lady Fiona sputtered. Agnes is hardly suitable to be a duchess. She has none of the training, none of the polish required of such a position. I believe the Duke is capable of determining what qualities he values in a potential wife, the Earl replied coldly. Now, I suggest we prepare for tomorrow's musical evening. Agnes, my dear, perhaps the blue silk gown would be appropriate. As Agnes left the room, she heard Lady Fiona's angry whispers and her father's measured responses. Something had shifted in their household dynamic, and she knew there would be consequences. That night, as Agnes prepared for bed, there was a soft knock at her door. To her surprise, it was Mary who entered, looking uncomfortable and uncertain. Mary, is something wrong? Her stepsister fidgeted with her dressing gown. I wanted to speak with you privately. Agnes gestured to a chair. Please sit. Mary perched on the edge of the seat, her hands twisting in her lap. Mother is furious, she began. I've never seen her so angry. She's convinced that you have somehow enchanted the Duke, and she is determined to put a stop to it. I have done nothing improper, Agnes said firmly. I know, Mary admitted, surprising Agnes. That's why I came. I wanted to warn you. Mother is planning something for tomorrow evening. I don't know what exactly, but she intends to create a situation that will embarrass you in front of the Duke and everyone else. Agnes was taken aback by this unexpected alliance. Why are you telling me this? Mary looked down. Because it's wrong. What Mother has done to you all these years, making you invisible, treating you as less than family, it's wrong. I've always known it, but I was too afraid to speak up. And now I see how the Duke looks at you and how you look at him, and I realize that what you have is real. Mary's voice softened. No one has ever looked at me that way, despite all Mother's scheming. Agnes reached out and touched Mary's hand. Thank you for the warning and for your honesty. Mary stood to leave. Be careful tomorrow. Mother is desperate, and desperate people can be dangerous. The musical evening at Thornhill Court was more elaborate than the Duke had suggested. The grand ballroom was filled with the county's elite, and a renowned soprano had been engaged to perform. Agnes entered on her father's arm, conscious of the eyes that followed her. Word had spread of the Duke's interest in the Earl of Harlington's daughter, and speculation was rife. Elliot came to greet them immediately, his eyes warming as they fell on Agnes. Miss Bennet, you look lovely this evening, he said, taking her hand. She wore the blue silk gown her father had suggested, with her mother's pearls at her throat and ears. It was simple compared to the elaborate ensembles of many ladies present, but its elegance suited her. Thank you, Your Grace, she replied, acutely aware of Lady Fiona's narrowed eyes beside her. I have reserved seats for you and your family in the front row, Elliot continued. The performance will begin shortly, but perhaps Miss Bennet might accompany me for a moment. There is something I wish to show her. Lady Fiona stepped forward. Your Grace, surely whatever you wish to show Agnes could wait until after the performance. It would be discourteous to the other guests if you were absent when the music begins. Elliot's expression cooled. I assure you, Lady Harlington, we shall return before the first note is played. Lord Harlington, if I may have your permission? The Earl nodded, ignoring his wife's glare. Of course, Your Grace. Elliot led Agnes away from the crowded ballroom, through a series of corridors and into a smaller, more intimate room. It was a portrait gallery lit by soft candlelight. I wanted to show you this, he said, guiding her toward a particular painting. The portrait depicted a woman in her early 30s, her face alight with intelligence and warmth. She had Elliot's striking blue eyes and the same subtle curve to her mouth when she smiled. Your mother? Agnes guessed. Yes, The late Duchess of Ashmont. Elliot's voice held a note of reverence. She was extraordinary, brilliant, kind, uncompromising in her principles. She died when I was 15, but her influence shaped me in ways I am still discovering. Agnes studied the portrait. You have her eyes, and her smile, though you show it less frequently. Elliot laughed softly. A fair observation. My mother believed in living openly, in showing one's true self to the world. After her death, my father retreated into coldness and formality. I followed his example for many years. And now? Agnes asked quietly. He turned to face her, his expression more open than she had ever seen it. Now I find myself wanting to honor my mother's philosophy, to live truthfully, to follow my heart rather than convention. Agnes's breath caught at the intensity in his gaze. That sounds like a worthy aspiration, Your Grace. Elliot, he corrected gently. When we are alone, please call me Elliot. Elliot, she whispered. He stepped closer, taking her hands in his. Agnes, what I wanted to ask you in the garden yesterday. Once again they were interrupted, this time by the sound of the gallery door opening forcefully. Lady Fiona stood there with Camilla and a young man Agnes didn't recognize behind her. There you are, Lady Fiona exclaimed with theatrical distress. Your Grace, forgive the intrusion, but the soprano has arrived and is asking for you. And Agnes, my dear, an unexpected guest has arrived who is most eager to see you. She ushered forward the young man, who bowed awkwardly. He was perhaps 25, with pleasant but unremarkable features and the manner of someone trying very hard to appear sophisticated. Mr. Henry Wilson, Lady Fiona introduced him. An old family acquaintance who has just returned from abroad. He was so hoping to renew his friendship with Agnes. Agnes had no recollection of ever meeting Mr. Wilson, but the trap was obvious. Lady Fiona had manufactured a prior attachment to create doubt in Elliot's mind. Elliot's expression had reverted to its customary reserve. Mr. Wilson, he acknowledged with a slight nod. How fortunate that you should arrive on an evening of music. Miss Bennet, shall we return to the ballroom? I believe the performance is about to begin. Throughout the soprano's performance, Agnes was acutely conscious of Mr. Wilson seated beside her, Lady Fiona's arrangement, and Elliot's rigid posture on her other side. The music washed over her unheard, as she contemplated the predicament Lady Fiona had created. After the performance, the guests mingled for refreshments. Mr. Wilson attached himself to Agnes's side, speaking at length about his travels in Europe, and occasionally hinting at a long-standing admiration for her that had apparently blossomed during his absence. It was awkward and transparent, but Agnes could hardly snub him publicly. Elliot watched from a distance, his face unreadable. When he finally approached, his manner was formal. Miss Bennet, might I have a moment of your time, Mr. Wilson began to protest, but a single glance from the Duke silenced him. Elliot led Agnes to a quiet alcove, partially screened by potted palms. His voice was low and controlled when he spoke. Your stepmother seems quite determined to promote Mr. Wilson's suit. Mr. Wilson has no suit, Agnes replied firmly. I had never met the man before tonight. This is Lady Fiona's creation, nothing more. The tension in Elliot's shoulders eased slightly. I suspected as much. Your discomfort was evident. Was it? I tried to be polite. To me, you are an open book, Agnes Bennet. His voice softened. Your expressions, your gestures, they speak volumes to one who pays attention. Agnes felt a blush rise to her cheeks. And you have been paying attention. From the moment I first saw you. He took a deep breath. Agnes, I cannot delay this question any longer, lest we be interrupted a third time. Will you— Agnes, Lady Fiona's voice cut through the moment like a knife. Come at once. Mr. Wilson is about to depart and wishes to bid you farewell. Elliot's jaw clenched. Lady Harlington, I must insist that you allow Miss Bennet and me a few moments of privacy. Lady Fiona's smile was brittle. I'm afraid that would be most improper, Your Grace. Agnes is in my care, and I cannot permit her to be alone with a gentleman, even one as honourable as yourself. Then perhaps Lord Harlington might chaperone us, Elliot suggested, his patience clearly wearing thin. My husband is engaged with the Viscount Halsey at present. Now, Agnes, do come along. Agnes looked at Elliot, apology in her eyes. I should go. This conversation is not concluded, he said quietly. I will call on you tomorrow." The ride home was tense. Lady Fiona spoke enthusiastically about Mr. Wilson's prospects and character, suggesting that he might be a suitable match for Agnes. "After all, you cannot expect to make a brilliant match like Mary or Camilla," she said with false sympathy. "Mr. Wilson may not be wealthy, but he is respectable, and I'm sure he would treat you well." "I have no interest in Mr. Wilson," Agnes stated flatly. "Don't be foolish, girl. The Duke of Ashmont is not going to marry you. He is simply amusing himself before making a suitable alliance. Mr. Wilson, on the other hand, is a real possibility." The Earl, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Fiona, that is enough. The Duke's intentions toward Agnes are his own affair, and I will not have you disparaging my daughter or attempting to manipulate her future." Lady Fiona's face contorted with anger. "You are blind, William. Can you not see what she is doing? She has deliberately set out to capture the Duke's attention, to outshine my daughters and secure a position far above her deserving." "Agnes has done nothing but be herself," the Earl replied coldly. "If the Duke prefers her to your daughters, it speaks to his discernment, not to any machinations on Agnes's part." "How dare you?" Lady Fiona gasped. "After all I have done for this family, after all I have sacrificed—" "What exactly have you sacrificed, Fiona?" the Earl demanded. "You have lived in comfort and luxury. Your daughters have had every advantage. The only person who has sacrificed in this arrangement is Agnes, who has been systematically erased from her own home to appease your jealousy." The carriage fell silent, Lady Fiona too shocked by her husband's outburst to respond. Agnes reached across and squeezed her father's hand, gratitude swelling in her heart. The next morning Agnes was in the library when Harrison, her father's valet, entered with a letter. "From His Grace, the Duke of Ashmont," he said, presenting it on a silver salver. "His messenger awaits a response." Agnes broke the seal with trembling fingers and read the brief note. "Miss Bennet, I must speak with you on a matter of the utmost importance. Would you do me the honor of walking with me in your father's gardens at 11 o'clock this morning? I have already requested and received Lord Harlington's permission for this meeting. Yours, Elliot Leeds, Duke of Ashmont." Agnes penned a simple acceptance and gave it to Harrison. Then she hurried to her room to prepare, her heart racing with anticipation and a newfound hope. At precisely 11 o'clock, Agnes walked into the gardens to find Elliot waiting for her by the stone fountain. He was dressed more casually than she had ever seen him, in a dark riding coat and buff breeches, his cravat tied simply. He looked younger, less formal, and impossibly handsome. "Your Grace," she curtsied. "Elliot," he corrected, taking her hand and raising it to his lips. "Please, Agnes." "Elliot," she amended, savoring the intimacy of his name. They walked in silence for a moment, following the gravel path through the autumn flowers. Finally, Elliot stopped and turned to face her. "Agnes, I have been trying to ask you something for days now, and I will brook no further interruption." His voice was determined but gentle. "When I first came to this county, I had no expectation of finding anything of interest, let alone someone who would change my life so completely." Agnes's heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. "From the first moment I saw you, sitting quietly at the end of your father's dinner table, I felt something I had never experienced before. A recognition, a certainty. You were different from any woman I had ever met, not because you tried to be, but because you simply were." He took both her hands in his. "I came to your father's house that night expecting the usual social charade, the usual parade of eligible young ladies. Instead I found you, authentic, intelligent, kind, despite the unkindness shown to you." "Elliot," Agnes whispered, unable to find more words. "With every conversation, every shared thought, every moment in your company, my admiration has grown. You have illuminated parts of myself I had long kept in darkness." His blue eyes searched hers. "I know this is sudden. I know that by society's standards, we should engage in a longer courtship, a more measured approach. But I have spent my life being measured and cautious, and I find I no longer have the patience for it." He lowered himself to one knee before her, still holding her hands. "Agnes Bennet, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Would you bring your light into my life permanently, as my duchess and my partner in all things?" Tears sprang to Agnes's eyes, blurring her vision. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes? with all my heart." Elliot rose and drew her into his arms. His kiss was gentle at first, then deepened with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Agnes. I never thought to find such love, but I am grateful beyond words that I have." "And I love you, Elliot," she replied. "You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I had forgotten my own worth." He slipped a ring onto her finger, an exquisite sapphire surrounded by diamonds. "This was my mother's. I think she would have loved you as I do." As they walked back to the house arm in arm, Agnes knew that her life had changed irrevocably. The shadows that had defined her existence for so long were giving way to a brightness she had never dared to imagine. And at the center of that light stood Elliot, the man who had seen her true self and chosen her above all others. News of the engagement between the Duke of Ashmont and Miss Agnes Bennet spread through the county like wildfire. Reactions ranged from astonishment to delight to envy, but none was as dramatic as Lady Fiona's. When Elliot and Agnes entered the drawing room to announce their news, her face had drained of all colour before she excused herself from the room. The Earl, by contrast, had embraced his daughter warmly and shaken Elliot's hand with genuine pleasure. "I could not wish for a finer man for Agnes," he declared. "You have my blessing and my gratitude for recognizing the treasure that she is." Mary and Camilla had offered subdued congratulations, their expressions a mixture of disappointment and resignation. Later, when they found Agnes alone, Mary surprised her by offering a sincere embrace. "I truly am happy for you," she said quietly. "The Duke loves you, anyone can see it." "Thank you, Mary," Agnes replied, touched by the gesture. Camilla nodded stiffly. "Mother is inconsolable," she admitted. "She had such hopes." "I know," Agnes said gently. "I am sorry for her disappointment, but I cannot regret finding happiness with Elliot." The sisters exchanged glances. "No," Mary said finally, "you should not regret it. Perhaps this will help Mother see that her methods are not the only path to securing a good match." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Elliot insisted on a short engagement, eager to make Agnes his wife before the Christmas season. There were settlements to arrange, wedding plans to make, and a duchess's trousseau to prepare. Lady Fiona remained coldly civil, her initial shock having hardened into bitter resentment. She participated in the wedding preparations with mechanical efficiency, but the warmth that should accompany such a joyous occasion was noticeably absent. Agnes tried to bridge the gap, offering olive branches in the form of seeking Lady Fiona's opinion on wedding details and including Mary and Camilla in the preparations. Her efforts were met with brittle politeness, but little genuine warmth. One afternoon, as Agnes was reviewing fabric samples for her wedding gown, Lady Fiona entered her room without knocking. "We need to speak," she said without preamble. Agnes set aside the samples. "Of course, Lady Fiona." Her stepmother paced the room, agitation evident in every movement. "You cannot imagine what this engagement has cost me," she began. "The humiliation, the speculation, the pity in the eyes of my peers." Agnes remained silent, sensing that Lady Fiona needed to unburden herself. "5 years," she continued. "5 years I have worked to position Mary and Camilla in society. Every connection cultivated, every advantage secured, every opportunity seized, all with the goal of making brilliant matches for them. And then you, who made no effort, who shrank into the background with your books and your solitary walks, you capture the most eligible bachelor in England." There was raw pain in her voice, and for the first time, Agnes felt a flicker of sympathy for her stepmother. "It was never a competition, Lady Fiona," she said softly. "Wasn't it?" Lady Fiona laughed bitterly. "Everything in this world is a competition for women. Our beauty, our accomplishments, our connections, they are the only currency we possess. When I married your father, I thought I had secured my daughters' futures. An earl's stepdaughters would have advantages my modest widow's portion could never provide." She sank into a chair, suddenly looking older and wearier than Agnes had ever seen her. "I never hated you, Agnes. I simply saw you as an obstacle to my daughter's prospects. You were the Earl's daughter, with a natural claim to his attention and affection that they could never have. So yes, I pushed you into the shadows. I redirected your father's focus to Mary and Camilla. I created a narrative in which they were the prizes to be won. And I was the competition to be eliminated, Agnes finished quietly. Lady Fiona did not deny it. Now you will be a duchess. The most powerful woman in the county, possibly in all of England save for royalty. The irony is exquisite. Agnes considered her words carefully before responding. I did not seek Elliot's attention or affection for status or advantage. I love him for who he is, not for his title or wealth. That is easy to say when you have won both the man and the position, Lady Fiona remarked, but the bite had gone from her tone. She seemed merely tired now. What would you have me do, Lady Fiona? Refuse the man I love to ease your disappointment? No, she sighed. What's done is done. I came to request that you consider using your influence to help Mary and Camilla make suitable matches. As the Duchess of Ashmont, your patronage will be valuable beyond measure. Agnes was startled by the request, though perhaps she shouldn't have been. Lady Fiona was nothing if not practical. I will always consider Mary and Camilla my sisters, she said carefully, and I will do what I can to ensure they have opportunities to form genuine connections. But I will not manipulate or scheme on their behalf. Any matches they make should be based on mutual affection and respect, not calculation. Lady Fiona's mouth tightened, but she nodded. I suppose that is all I can ask, though I maintain that affection is a luxury many cannot afford. As she rose to leave, Agnes spoke again. Lady Fiona, I hope that in time we might find a way to be true family to one another. Despite our past, I bear you no ill will. Her stepmother paused at the door. You are more generous than I would be in your position, she admitted. Perhaps that is why the Duke chose you after all. With that, she departed, leaving Agnes to ponder the complex woman who had shaped so much of her life through opposition. The weeks leading up to the wedding were filled with fittings, meetings, and social engagements. Agnes found herself thrust into the spotlight after years of invisibility, and the transition was sometimes overwhelming. Elliot remained her steadfast support, often whisking her away for quiet moments alone when the pressure became too great. During one such respite, as they walked through the frost-covered gardens of Thornhill Court, Agnes confided her anxieties. Sometimes I wonder if I am equal to the role of Duchess, she admitted. The responsibilities, the expectations, it's a world away from the life I've known. Elliot squeezed her hand. You underestimate yourself, my love. The role of Duchess is not merely about hosting grand parties or wearing fine gowns. It is about leadership, about using one's position to effect positive change. Your intelligence, your compassion, your integrity, these are the qualities that will make you an extraordinary Duchess. You have more faith in me than I do, Agnes smiled. Then borrow my faith until your own grows stronger, he replied. Besides, we will face every challenge together. That is the beauty of marriage. The burdens are shared, as are the joys. As the wedding day approached, there was one final challenge to overcome. Lady Fiona had insisted that Mary and Camilla serve as Agnes's bridesmaids, but there was obvious tension in their fittings and preparations. Agnes decided to address it directly and invited her stepsisters to tea in her private sitting room. I wanted to thank you both, she began once they were settled, for agreeing to stand with me at the wedding. Mary and Camilla exchanged glances. Mother insisted, Camilla said bluntly. Agnes nodded. I know. And I understand if your hearts aren't truly in it, but I would like us to move forward without resentment if possible. That's easy for you to say, Camilla replied, a hint of bitterness in her tone. You've won everything. Camilla, Mary admonished. That's not fair, isn't it? She's marrying the Duke of Ashmont. She'll be a duchess, for heaven's sake. She trailed off. While you still have every opportunity for happiness, Agnes finished gently. Your worth isn't determined by the titles of the men you marry. Neither is mine. I am marrying Elliot because I love him and he loves me. His dukedom is incidental to that love. Mary studied her thoughtfully. You really believe that, don't you? With all my heart, Agnes affirmed. Then you're fortunate indeed, Mary said softly. Mother has taught us that marriage is a strategic alliance, nothing more. Love is a pleasant fiction at best, a dangerous distraction at worst. And do you believe that? Agnes asked. After a pause, Mary shook her head. No, I want what you and the Duke have found. A marriage based on mutual respect and genuine affection. Camilla looked less certain. I don't know what I believe anymore. All my life, Mother has prepared us for making brilliant matches. Now I'm not sure what I'm supposed to aim for instead. Perhaps that's the point, Agnes suggested. Maybe it's time for you to decide what you want, rather than what Lady Fiona wants for you. The sisters considered this in silence. Finally, Mary spoke. I think I would like us to be real sisters, Agnes. Not competitors, not opponents, but family. Is that possible after all that's happened? Agnes felt tears prick her eyes. I would like nothing better. Even Camilla managed a small smile. I suppose having a duchess for a sister has its advantages, she admitted. And the Duke does have many eligible friends, Agnes laughed. One step at a time, Camilla. But yes, you will both be welcome at Thornhill Court, always. It was a beginning, a tentative bridge across years of enforced distance. As they continued their tea, the conversation flowing more easily than ever before, Agnes felt another piece of her new life falling into place. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, a perfect December morning. Agnes stood at the window of her childhood bedroom, watching the winter sunlight glint off the frost-covered gardens. In a few hours, she would become the Duchess of Ashmont, leaving behind the shadows of Rosewood Hall for the brilliance of a new life with Elliot. Her wedding gown was a masterpiece of ivory silk and Brussels lace, elegant in its simplicity, yet undeniably regal. Her mother's pearls adorned her throat and ears, and a delicate diamond tiara, Elliot's gift, would soon be placed upon her upswept hair. A knock at the door announced the arrival of her father. The Earl of Harlington entered, his eyes misting as he beheld his daughter in her bridal finery. Agnes, he breathed, you are the very image of your mother today. She would be so proud of the woman you've become. Agnes embraced him, careful not to crush her gown. Thank you, father, for everything, for standing by me, for believing in me. I haven't always done so as I should have, he admitted. After your mother died, I lost my way. I allowed Fiona to dictate terms that were unjust to you. I can only ask your forgiveness. There is nothing to forgive, Agnes assured him. We have both found our way back to each other, and that is what matters. The Earl smiled, the weight of old regrets lifting from his shoulders. Your Elliot is a fortunate man, though I believe he knows it. He offered his arm. Shall we? Your bridegroom awaits. The village church was filled to capacity with the elite of English society. Peers of the realm, distinguished politicians, and the county's leading families had gathered to witness the union of the Duke of Ashmont and Miss Agnes Bennet. As Agnes walked down the aisle on her father's arm, whispers of admiration followed her progress. At the altar stood Elliot, resplendent in formal attire, his blue eyes fixed upon her with such love and pride that Agnes felt her heart might burst with happiness. Mary and Camilla followed as her bridesmaids, both looking genuinely pleased, despite the complicated emotions the day must have evoked. In the front pew, Lady Fiona sat straight-backed and dignified, her expression carefully neutral. Yet as Agnes passed, she gave a small nod of acknowledgement, perhaps the closest thing to blessing she could offer. The ceremony was a blend of solemn tradition and personal touches. Agnes and Elliot had selected passages from their favourite books to be read alongside the traditional vows. When they exchanged rings, his a plain gold band, hers an exquisite band of diamonds to complement her engagement ring, their hands were steady, but their voices thick with emotion. I, Elliot James Leeds, take thee, Agnes Elizabeth Bennet, to be my wedded wife. I, Agnes Elizabeth Bennet, take thee, Elliot James Leeds, to be my wedded husband. And then it was done. With a kiss that sealed their union and the vicar's proclamation, Agnes became the Duchess of Ashmont. As they turned to face their assembled guests, Elliot whispered, "My light, my love, my Duchess." The wedding breakfast at Rosewood Hall was a lavish affair, the culmination of weeks of planning. Agnes and Elliot moved among their guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes with gracious smiles. Lady Fiona had outdone herself with the arrangements, perhaps as a final demonstration of her social capabilities. To Agnes's surprise, as the celebrations continued, Lady Fiona approached her and Elliot in a quiet moment. "Your Grace," she addressed Elliot with perfect propriety, "I must congratulate you on gaining such a wife. Agnes will bring honour to your name and home." There was a hint of genuine feeling beneath the formal words. "Thank you, Lady Harlington," Elliot replied, equally formal but not unkind. "I am indeed the most fortunate of men." Lady Fiona turned to Agnes. "Duchess," she said, the title both an acknowledgement and a concession. May your marriage bring you joy. She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, and may you never know the fears that drive a mother to desperate measures for her children's security. It was as close to an apology as Lady Fiona would likely ever offer. Agnes accepted it with a gracious nod. Thank you, Lady Fiona. I wish the same happiness for Mary and Camilla in their own time and in their own way. A truce had been declared, imperfect but real. As Lady Fiona moved away to oversee some detail of the reception, Elliot squeezed Agnes's hand. You continue to surprise me with your generosity of spirit, he murmured. Life is too short for enduring grudges, Agnes replied. Besides, I have everything I could possibly want. It costs me nothing to be kind. After the celebrations, Agnes and Elliot departed for Thornhill Court, where they would spend a quiet week before embarking on a wedding journey to Italy. As their carriage rolled through the gates of what was now her home, Agnes felt a profound sense of rightness. Welcome home, Duchess, Elliot said, helping her from the carriage. The staff of Thornhill Court had lined up to greet their new mistress, from the butler and housekeeper to the lowest scullery maid. Agnes took the time to speak to each one, committing names to memory and expressing her pleasure at joining the household. That night, as husband and wife, Agnes and Elliot discovered the depth and beauty of their love in the most intimate way. In his arms, Agnes found a passion she had never imagined, a connection that transcended the physical to touch their very souls. I love you beyond words, my Duchess, Elliot whispered against her hair as they lay entwined in the stillness afterward. And I love you, my Duke, she replied, nestling closer. Today marks the beginning of our greatest adventure. The early months of their marriage were a time of adjustment and discovery. Agnes embraced her new role as Duchess of Ashmont with characteristic thoughtfulness, learning the complex workings of the estate and establishing herself as a worthy partner to her husband. Together, they initiated improvements to tenant cottages, founded a school for the children of estate workers, and became patrons of various charitable endeavours. True to her word, Agnes maintained contact with Mary and Camilla, inviting them to Thornhill Court and introducing them to a wider social circle. Mary, in particular, blossomed away from her mother's oppressive expectations, revealing a talent for music and a lively wit that attracted genuine admirers. Even Lady Fiona gradually softened, especially when Mary formed an attachment to the son of a viscount, a match that satisfied her ambitions while being based on sincere affection. The Earl visited often, delighting in the transformation of his once shy daughter into a confident duchess who commanded respect without sacrificing her essential kindness. As spring gave way to summer, Agnes made a discovery that brought new joy to her marriage. One morning, as she and Elliot breakfasted in their private sitting room, she shared the news she had confirmed with the physician the previous day. "Elliot," she began, her eyes shining, "I have something to tell you." He looked up from his correspondence, immediately attentive to the tone of her voice. "What is it, my love?" "We are to have a child," she said, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. "Next winter, Thornhill Court will welcome a new heir." Elliot's face transformed with wonder and joy. He rose immediately and came to kneel beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "Agnes, my darling, this is the greatest gift you could give me. A child, our child." Tears of happiness sprang to both their eyes as he gathered her into his arms. That evening they shared the news with the household, and celebrations ensued throughout the estate. Messages were dispatched to her father and stepfamily, and plans were made for the nursery. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, with Elliot hovering protectively over his wife, despite her assurances that she was perfectly well. By autumn, her condition was evident, her form softened with the growing life within. Elliot found her more beautiful than ever, marveling at the miracle they had created together. On a snowy December night, almost exactly a year after their wedding, Agnes gave birth to a son, Edward William Leeds, future Duke of Ashmont. The infant had his father's striking blue eyes and a dusting of his mother's chestnut hair. As Agnes held him in her arms, Elliot beside them on the bed, the circle of their happiness seemed complete. "He's perfect," Elliot whispered, gently touching his son's tiny hand. "Just like his mother." Agnes smiled, weary but radiant. "He is the culmination of our love, the physical embodiment of everything we have built together." As they gazed at their newborn son, Agnes reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the invisible stepdaughter, relegated to the shadows of her own home, she had emerged into the light of love and purpose. Not because of the title she now bore, but because one man had seen her true worth when others had not. In the years that followed, Agnes and Elliot's marriage only deepened in love and partnership. Edward was joined by a sister, Charlotte, named for Elliot's mother. The family divided their time between Thornhill Court and their London residence, where Agnes became known for her literary salon and charitable work. Mary eventually married her Viscount's son, a match that brought genuine happiness and satisfied even Lady Fiona's ambitions. Camilla, after a brief flirtation with a notorious rake that Agnes and Elliot helped to discourage, found contentment with a prosperous merchant, whose wealth and devotion compensated for his lack of title. The Earl of Harlington remained a doting grandfather to all his grandchildren, including those born to Mary and Camilla. Even Lady Fiona mellowed with time, her sharp edges softened by the fulfillment of her daughter's prospects and her own secure position in society. As for Agnes and Elliot, they never forgot the lessons of their beginning, that true love sees beyond social position to the heart of a person, and that sometimes the brightest light can be found in the most overlooked corners. Their story became something of a legend in the county, a testament to the power of genuine connection in a world often ruled by calculation and appearance. And if in later years the Duke of Ashmont was occasionally heard to refer to his wife as "my light," those who knew their story understood the profound truth in that simple endearment. For Agnes had indeed brought illumination to his life, just as he had drawn her from the shadows into the radiance of being truly seen and deeply loved. The end. Dear listener, today I want to tell you something different, something you may not have heard in a long time. You don't need to be seen by everyone to be essential. You don't need to make noise to leave deep marks on the world. Sometimes the most powerful souls live in silence. Like Agnes, perhaps you've spent a lifetime putting others first, walking softly, letting go, making space, without ever losing the kindness in your gaze. But know this, the universe remembers. Life hears even the whispers of the heart, and one day, without warning, it answers back, "You are here, still here." And that, in itself, is a sacred victory. You've endured every season, the winds that hurt, the absences that ache, the loves that faded. And yet within you still lives a sky full of possibilities. Maybe no one told you this today. You deserve rest, peace, a quiet comfort for your soul. May your pillow cradle your tiredness with tenderness tonight. May the dark hours bloom into a garden of beautiful dreams. And may tomorrow's steps feel light, as if the world has been waiting for you to bloom again. You are cherished here, and always will be. Thank you for walking this path with us. With heartfelt affection, Legends of the Fall team. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. Your presence here is a gift, and your support allows us to keep bringing you heartfelt stories filled with love, redemption, and soul-stirring moments. If this story touched you, please subscribe, like, comment, and share. It helps us, from the bottom of our hearts, to feel encouraged, seen, and motivated to create more beautiful stories for you. And don't go just yet. At the end of this video, another story awaits you. Click and be swept away by more emotions, more romance, and more unforgettable endings. Thank you for being here. The Legends of the Fall team.